Okay, I think it's going. Excellent. Thanks. Thank you, Jason. Welcome, everybody. KGB Monday Night Poetry. This is year 24, season 47, episode 11. And we are just kind of keep this rolling. In fact, we are hoping to be back in the bar in the fall. We don't know for sure almost anything yet, really for sure. But it's been awesome to get this kind of community going on here, too. And we are hoping in the long run to maybe do something like this where we can still sort of broadcast. I don't know if anybody saw or follows KGB on Instagram, but I don't that they got actually broken into over the weekend. So they're barely surviving as it is, and then she has to change the locks and everything now. But a great place, but more on that later. Really excited to introduce our first poet. We got a really great trio tonight, actually. So we'll just kind of get to it and more on the bar later. Okay, so with Benjamin Garcia, we get a poet very much of the world that he lives in, which is to say, it's not a poet who looks on passively, but seems to really contend with the cultural moment and consider the very difficult, sometimes seemingly unsolvable problems of the day. Benjamin is a technician with language, someone who seems to understand its mechanism so deeply that he can at once be skeptical of our ability to use it to produce any kind of truth, and yet perform with it using towering intellect and cathartic insight. He tells us that words, quote, have luggage, that, quote, tongues make mistakes and mistakes make languages. He articulates that language has a strong effect on how we label and categorize people and cultures and how we come to decide and identify why we consider things to be taboo. Language becomes the place where ideas about culture become reinforced, where norms are established that perhaps never needed to be considered norms, and then are staunchly reinforced culturally, sometimes for generations, sometimes beyond that. This corruption of language is very real and would be disheartening if we didn't also have a poet here capable of using language to such incredible ends. Indeed, who, after breaking it down, reminds us of its potential. Only a lawyer could possibly explain how language is corrupted, he writes, quote, like a snake that ate a parrot whole, spits out the bright feathers without a bird to hold them together. This meta-awareness of language reveals a poet capable of doing altogether new things. His cadences are electric. He has both the reliable beat and sense of limitless creative possibility found in like a great drum solo. Quote, I am the weak old ham hock whore of horticulture. Benjamin is a poet you can really listen to. In preparing for this reading, I watched we always like to read the poets, and these days you can also sometimes find some videos online. We like to talk a lot about the sort of medium and message qualities of doing this online now, and just somebody who is just great to hear has obviously got its benefits. He has work that's of serious social consequence, and that can also be very funny. You'll find him upending all kinds of mainstreams, even the mainstream idea that it's cool to upend the mainstream in the first place. At times, his writing seems to transcend the very idea of writing. Cultural identity, sexual identity, even mortality are drawn together almost cosmically. His debut collection, Thrown in the Throat, was selected by Kazim for the 2019 National Poetry Series. He's the son of Mexican immigrants, one of whom is formerly undocumented and one whose family has lived in New Mexico long before it was claimed by the U.S. Originally from New Mexico, raised in Texas, he received his BA from the University of New Mexico and MFA from Cornell. He works as a sexual health and harm reduction educator through the Finger Lakes region of New York. He primarily works in jails and drug treatment programs providing HIV, hepatitis C, STI, and opiate overdose prevention related services. It's sort of what I was saying before about this idea of kind of like living very much in the time and contending with its issues. His poems have recently appeared in Missouri Review, APR, Crazy Horse, New England Review, many others. Essays have appeared in Kenyon Review, and he had the honor of being the 2017 Latinx Scholar at the Frost Place, the 2018 Cantamundo Fellow at the Palm Beach Poetry Festival, and a 2019 Lambda Literary Fellow. Here is Benjamin Garcia.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me. Thank you all for being here. Kazim, thank you so much for this really wonderful, wonderful gift that has been giving me a lot to look forward to in a year that actually has been, difficult in other ways. But this is something that has helped me get through that. So thank you so much. I'm going to read a couple of poems here. I'm going to start off with the first poem in the collection. So this is The Language in Question. There are a number of poems with the same title, exploring what language can do and how we use it. So The Language in Question. The language in question is criminal. Like a shark, it ate a license plate, and it ate the shark. Well, the fins it poached anyway. It gorges like a gorge, the river flowing like a scarf. Some magician just keeps pulling. It ate away the deposits of clay. Like a sinkhole, the language in question ate a chateau and the family inside. It pickpockets the stranger with gusto. It barters with bards, pays in counterfeit. Money is no object. The tongue desires, the language acquires. The language in question likes conquest, moves west because it hungers like locusts, like the larvae of the caddisfly. This tongue makes a shell of what it pilfered. It's the apex predator in the food pyramid. It ransacked the pyramids, tours the spoils of theft to the country of origin, but only on loan. A paper wasp that makes its home from what it chewed and spat back out of your own, and it stings you if you get too close. Too close, stung. I told you, the language in question is the S-shaped tongue of the anteater, the so-called worm tongue. It warms itself at the fire it made from other people's scrolls, codices, tomes. It entombs and embalms and lights bombs. The language in question thinks it's Billy the Kid. The language in question is shooting up the saloon. The language in question is shooting up meth, dope, coke. Whatever's on hand is the drug of choice. The language in question is corrupt. It's poison and salve, savage and sage. It's honeysuckle and bitter oleander. Only a lawyer could make sense of it and sell it to the highest bidder. Like a snake that ate a parrot whole, spits out the bright feathers without a bird to hold them together. That's what it's like when the accent doesn't even come close. The language gets twisted, the tongue gets tired. I bet it's kinky and likes to be tied, likes every bit of itself bit. This tongue bids adieu, hold in the mouth. Adios, amigos. So yeah, some of these are a little bit of a mouthful. And I don't know, I mean, I guess that for me related to the way that sometimes you can feel overwhelmed with language and how it can kind of beat you up. I'm gonna read this next poem is an ode that's here in a series of odes in the collection. This is Ode to the Peacock, and it starts off with a reference to the hanky code. So for folks who might not be familiar, you know, it's before Grindr, a way for gay men to let other gay men know, hey, this is what I'm into, and you know, let's get together or whatever, you know. So it was basically a handkerchief of different colors that meant different things, and you wore it on your back pocket to signify one thing, the left one to signify another, and it was this whole code around just hooking up. And I think there's something really cool and wonderful about that. So, Ode to the Peacock. In the language of handkerchiefs, there's really nothing I don't want. I'm glad to be paid in gold when the devil beats his you know what. If you think it's indecent for a body to fan open, iridescent, gird your gaze, because honey, I'm throwing up my kerchief like a flare gunshot. Watch me unskirt a frosted muffin, top me with sprinkles. I'm flashing red, yellow, green, go. You're the stallion and I'm the mare. Smear my queer into the mirror. Now you are the mare, and I am the stale smell in the restroom stall, and you're an all-you-can-eat buffet. Let me just say, your eyes are the most beautiful. Urinal cake blue. Blue as in the past tense of blow. Blow as in Coke, even though you suck it up. Buttercup and butterscotch. A man named Scott wants his scotch filthy gorgeous, or maybe that's a martini. A man named Martin, a man named who knows what. Who knows what it means to pluck roses from my chest using just his teeth, and sometimes, yes, blood, which is thicker than water. I know something thicker. It's called incest when a nephew makes his uncle, say pee, say cock. Katy Perry sings the song, let me see your peacock cock. Behold my royal flesh stamped with eyes. Don't tiptoe in your slippers. Stomp on eggs, shells, balloons. Lick my boots until I see myself being spit on like you're squelching the inferno. Sometimes fire, sometimes feathers. Elect a whip or bind me blind in leather, pink polka dot and seafoam green. If you don't already know, let me show you what it means for a boy to be, a boy to be. When hard in my harness, you'd best call me daddy, but don't call any of this dirty, not unless the person doing it wants it. Then it's smut. Wipe the rosary from my brow. Use the fabric pouring from your lips. So I will read one that is a little different in pacing. So this is a toast to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The waitress tending our party of three dips her tan torso over the table as she grabs the menus from us men. Well, men -1, since it appears that I'm the only guy not looking. Not looking at women, anyway. The gold crucifix on her necklace rubs against my brother's straw as she withdraws and Jesus ascends again to the heaven of her breasts. The motorboat is what I order, described as something between a porter and a stout. Now that's my kind of cross. My father says there's no such thing as sin that's large and sin that's small. Drinking too much, he says, is the sin, not the drinking, as he peers through our waitress's gingham crop top. There's no such thing as small or large sizes here, the waitress says. Man size is large, girl is small. Do you really want to order the girl size? Fine, I want the girl size. My brother laughs and my father looks away. It's stupid, my brother says, but are you really telling me her body did nothing for you? My father looks at me like God, looking for the smallest redemption in Gomorrah, looking for any reason in Sodom not to raise it. There is no reason for how things are sometimes. Better to accept. My father didn't raise me to be a girly man, a fact that might bother him, except for the other fact. He didn't raise me. It bothers him. Some people are beyond saving. Me, I tell my brother, as I look over his shoulder at the bearded roughneck going gaga for our waitress as he sips from his bottle. There is nothing straight about me, except maybe my hair. And even that has gotten kinky with age. I drink beer because I'm thirsty, eating salted pretzels. I don't have a prayer when I say amen. And I will read one last poem. If there is a suggestion, I'd be happy to take it. Otherwise, I'll end with this one. So this
Read
is
two more poems. Read two more poems.
Read two more. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me. This is another language in question poem, and so this one I wrote after a suicide prevention training that really focused on how we talk and don't talk, and what would actually be helpful in situations where someone is expressing the idea that they want to take their life. So the language in question. Defying gravity after all isn't the same as flying after all. Are you thinking of hurting yourself isn't the same as are you thinking you might kill yourself. We must be confident being more direct. An X drawn in orange on a tree trunk. One morning it was there, 30 feet of maple, gone by the time I came back home. The city gave me no choice. Sometimes we have no choice, and warning signs can go unnoticed until I didn't think they were serious. They wanted attention, didn't mean it. Sometimes it doesn't hurt. Death feels like a solution. Sometimes it hurts so much. After all, you are thinking of hurting yourself. No, you are thinking of hurting other people, not us. Walking a gorge late at night, leaves rustle there. Should I live and should I live? No one wants to die. Are you nobody too? Good, then we're not alone. Please don't die. It's good advice I don't want. My kind of sadness is like my favorite tree, planted long before me, shadow punctured now and then with light. when gusts ghost through, and that's enough for me. The garden thrived, except the lilies planted in full sun didn't make it. I planted a new tree in the hollow of what I had lost. One day I'll rest in its shade, should I live that long. And I was gonna end with a different poem, but I will change that. So this is a gay epithalamium. Girls, never ask your gay best friend when they're getting married. Never call your gay best friend your gay best friend. Boys and girls, never ask your gay friends who is the woman and who is the man. Because that's the whole point. We may act like a lady, but we don't care for the lady parts. Boys, if you mean to ask who is the bottom and who is the top, I hope you know that asking this demonstrates interest in being one of the two. One of the two. Boys and girls, listen to me, still breaking up with old black and white habits. When you mail your acceptance, please check if you prefer the beef or fish. In English, beef can also mean to have a problem with. In Spanish, a fish has been called he who dies by the mouth. When I have a problem, I spit it out. Chicken isn't a menu option. My mouth has gotten my teeth knocked out before. Can you guess which? Don't assume I will get married, but love is love. My tongue is in my cheek again, because where else would it be? Love is love, you say, as if the heart were a palindrome. Friends, don't pretend orientation doesn't matter. Or do these two sound the same to you? This cake is to die for. Is this the cake I died for? No, I don't care if a calla lily isn't a true lily. I would still include it in my bouquet. I would stick it in your centerpiece anyway. You want to know why I haven't gotten married? There aren't enough kinds of lilies. Tiger, calla, Easter, Asiatic, of the valley. Or maybe I don't think Mary should get married, anchored to the past. Or maybe because my partner can officiate a wedding for his friends in 50 states, but a baker can still refuse to make our cake. It's an old habit I still can't break, thinking about getting gay married to my gay best friend, praying to my gay God, having dinner with my gay family, using my gay hand to spoon gay cake into my cake mouth. There aren't enough words for being gay. Fairy, pansy, sissy, and even cake, but also confirmed bachelor, friend of Dorothy, family. Why do you smash cake into your spouse's face on your wedding day? You don't have to answer, because my tongue is in my cheek again. Where else could it go? I'm asking for a friend. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Wow. Matt, do you want to go straight in? Do you want to take a break? Matt, you're muted. You're muted, Matt. Matt, we can't hear you. Oh, I have to do that because I took away people's power to unmute themselves. That's my fault. I have to give it. Matt, you can unmute yourself now.
Great.
I'm a monster.
I could use just like a 1 minute break, and then
Cool.
and then I will be back. Thank you for that beautiful reading, Benjamin.
Well, let's take a little break, and everyone. I put the hanky code in the chat, so if you want to go check out what are in those, it is still in use. I once had a student who wore a gray hanky in his left pocket the entire semester, and I couldn't say anything because that would be completely inappropriate. But it was a little weird knowing that one of my students was a bondage top, but we could never talk about it. Those are the breaks. We do also, as John was saying, need to ask for your support for the KGB bar. As you can see, we are not there. We are here virtually. And I'm sharing my screen right now. You should be seeing the Fundly website. And so this is where you can make a donation to the KGB bar. And you can donate anything you want. If you do donate at the $15 level, then you'll have 2 drinks waiting for you when you get back to KGB, which is not that far from now. And there'll be a $4 tip that goes straight to the employees. These levels go all the way up to $50,000. If you have $50,000 just lying around and you would like to have a $45,000 bar tab, drinks are on you the next time we get together, because your liver does not think you should drink all $45,000 of it yourself. So we will put the link for that, but don't feel like you have to give any particular amount. Anything really helps keep KGB afloat so that we are there when we get back, because they have been hit so hard by this. It's really been amazing that they have worked really hard to keep all of the series going, that, we're all sharing this Zoom account. For some reason, I can't get to the KGB background. I'll see if it's back. It is not. Usually I have pretend KGB behind me, and for some reason my green screen has failed. But I will put that link in the chat, and so if you'd like to make a contribution to KGB, please do. And Matt, back to you.
All right. So thank you for indulging me. My wife and I joke sometimes that if I were a DJ, my name would be DJ P Break. She'd be like, "Where's DJ P Break?" Ah, all right. So that is the wrong document. This is the right document. All right. So I have used this comparison before in regard to the poems of Yalie Kamara, but I like the idea of putting it on the record. So in the early years of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, throughout the whole show really, Hilary Banks was known around Bel-Air as the girl who never wore anything twice. There is more than a bit of Hilary Banks in Yalie's poems, in that there is something going on conceptually, formally, visually, that is unique to every poem of Yalie's I've had the pleasure to read. Yalie's poems play in the fact that poetry is both a typographic and an oral art, as opposed to ignoring the fact that poetry is one while reveling in the other. In the way that the nature of an electron is to exist as both wave and matter, the nature of a poem is typographically oral, orally typographic, however you take it. Yalie delights in this electron-like nature of the poem, the same poem that pleases and teases the eye on the page when read aloud, moves swiftly and sings. The speaker in Yalie's poems is on the autobiographical side of the speaker spectrum. The I in the poems and the flesh and blood poet share an origin story, a mother, a hometown of Oakland. What makes Yalie's poems unique among autobiographical poetics is how much of the stage she shares with other people. I mean, who's your crew? Yalie once asked apostrophically in response to a book in which no human being other than the poet made a single appearance. Her comment made me realize how full of other people Yalie's own poems are, and to what an unusual degree. For her, the solitary act of writing a poem is an occasion for the recollection and exploration of the joys and experiences that occur only when humans are with humans. One beautiful thing about autobiographical poetics are recurring characters. An additive kind of work, a composite portraiture, happens organically from poem to poem. Yalie's mother is such a recurring character. More than that, she's like the sitcom character who enters and the studio audience applauds on sight. I admire the way that Yalie lets her speak, which is to say, Yalie doesn't write, quote, like my mother would say that, putting the mother in the lampshade of an indirect quote. Instead, the mother is in the scene, in the poem, speaking. Yalie does this because Yalie is smart. The mama's Sierra Leonean perspective on Oakland, on America, on American culture gives Yalie's poems a completely organic engine of Austronenyi. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce that correctly, Jason.
No, it was actually quite good. Australia, that was very, very good.
Oh, thank you. Through the lens of the mama, for instance, a normalized American custom like trick-or-treating on Halloween can be observed as, you want to what? Dress like a monster and go begging from door to door? Absolutely not. And then there is Yalie's poem Bisedu, which is one of the most beautiful poems that anyone has written lately. Yalie is the author of 2 collections of poetry, a brief biography of my name, and When the Living Sing. She's been nominated for a Pushcart, was a finalist for the 2020 National Poetry Series and the 2017 Brunel International African Poetry Prize. She's received fellowships from Vermont Studio Center, where she was with Kazim, I believe, which is what made me think, hey, we'll get some friends together. As well as the National Book Critics Circle Emerging Critics Fellow. She was a featured poet at the 2020 Joe Dinar Dodge Poetry Festival. To return to the Hillary Banks analogy, in her time getting a PhD at the University of Cincinnati, Yalie has also set the fashion bar extremely high, as well as the good person bar. I'm honored to call her a friend, and we are so happy to have her and hear her tonight at KGB. Yalie Kamara.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful introduction. How's everybody doing? Everybody's doing okay? Thank you for joining us on a Monday. Thank you to the KGB Bar series for having me. Matt, one of my favorites in this life, thank you for inviting me. Thanks to old and new friends for being here. And I'm really excited to be reading with Kazim and Ben. Ben, who already left fan mail in the chat, and Kazim, very good to see you again. And just to make it extra awkward, I just want to tell you how much I love you, Yona Harvey, as a writer and as an inspiration. And so it's so cool to see you here. And yeah, I'll go ahead and get started now that I've made that just the right amount of awkward. Cool. So the first poem I'm going to be reading is a poem, surprise, surprise, about my mother, called Mother's Rules. And this is everything my mother, well, not everything she said, but this is all true. These are all things she said. She may not remember them, but she's told me these things. And my mom is right like 99% of the time, but I don't tell her that. These are some of her rules that she's told me in life to kind of guide me. Mother's rules, this is from my mother, Agatha Kamara. 1, if you see me praying in the living room, never sit in front of me. You are not God. 2, when we go to a restaurant and I don't know any foods on the menu, never order me a meal that is spelt with silent letters. I came to eat, not to explore. 3, you didn't make food. No, God did. You cooked food. Watch your English, watch your faith. 4, your Creole is offensive. When you speak, you sound like Shabba Ranks. Your accent is funny, but keep practicing. It is the only way we will be able to gossip in peace while at the supermarket. 5, try to learn the language of your lover and his family. They could be smiling to your face and getting ready to trade you for 6 goats and 3 mules during your first trip to their homeland. 6, if anyone stares at you for too long, more than 5 seconds, start speaking an imaginary language while maintaining eye contact. They will be the first to look away. 7, consider the consequence of purchasing human hair wigs, secondhand clothing, and used furniture. Maybe you will feel beautiful and also save money, but you never know whose bad luck or misfortune will be sitting on your head, body, or in the home in which you sleep. Buy what you can truly afford. 8, your father's Muslim, so you are too. 1989 to 1993. I am Christian, so you are too. 1993 to 2012. I am Catholic now, but you keep praying. 2012 to present. 9, you laugh at me now, like I laughed at my mother, like she laughed at hers, like your daughters will laugh at you, and I will live long enough to forgive your folly. 10, just make sure to pray. Amen. Thank you. And this next poem is based on something. I went on a trip with my aunt and my mother, and my aunt told me a story about migrating to America that I never heard before. And she told me once, and because I'm a nosy poet, I was like, Mom, I have to interview her again so I can get more details. And my mom's like, you can never interview her, and you can never repeat this story. And because I'm a rebellious first generation American, I've decided to make a poem out of it. So, because my mother says, don't repeat this, you must know that in the early 80s, Auntie X moved to New Jersey, though I'm not sure where she lived, Perth Amboy, Newark, Orange. At some point, she worked in a hospital, probably fluffing the stiff pillows of elders, or even using a bare thumb to lift dribble from a thin lip. The old folks loved her. the first African they'd ever met. Weird British spelling, pretty good English though, charming in an American adjacent way. By her own admission, she was too cute for her own good. Auntie X was all mahogany, a head full of dripless Jerry curls, staccato laughter, small waist, and a bad winking habit. Her hip action, like a slow motion metronome whenever Bunny Mac was on rotation at the disco. She was a threat to too many married men, which is why some nervous and evil wife made the call. So they showed up at her job, them, the ones with the official badges, the clipboards, the multicolored click Bic pens, and the questions about her paper and her papers. Unaware of the morning elevator's mixed company, the agent asked, on what floor can we find her? The fifth, Auntie X's manager lies while stepping on her shoe like a gas pedal in the expressway. Auntie X gets it and folds into her own breath like a ghost. Excuse us, they say, unknowingly brushing past her in their exit. Auntie X goes up to the 8th floor. A nurse's assistant whisks her to the 9th. With a blanket in hand, she leaves the America she knows. While they comb the building, she hides in the morgue. Shift nurses come and leave offerings in the tundra of shelved cadavers. Black tea, inspect. Turkey sandwich, inspect. Applesauce, inspect. Auntie X's teeth chatter, inspect. Are you okay, inspect. Blanket, inspect. Wait, inspect. Wait, inspect. She looks at her watch. The cold metal on her wrist made colder by the absence of time in this new country. Eventually, they leave. Auntie X inhales and thaws out in a staff room. They halfway promise to return, though they never do. The hospital keeps her and gives her more hours, perhaps impressed by how well she plays dead. She blesses them still. Auntie X tells me this in a hotel room on a cool September evening. The air conditioner blasts against her bare shoulders. She hands me a $100 bill. Get some boots, she says. This winter will be cold. The next poem, thank you. The next poem I'm going to be reading is called Souvenir, and it's based on an experience I had in Barbados a few summers ago when I was kind of under the mentorship of a fantastic poet named Margaret Gill. And she told me that when Black folks sweat in Barbados, they can see the rainbow on their skin. And so this was, this is based on our conversation and our exercise thereafter. Come do this, Miss Margaret calls out to me. And so I leave her air-conditioned office, then follow. We stand here under the hot fist of this Bayesian sky. Each of our right arms is extended. She rotates her wrist, then I swivel mine. Our bracelets clang against the wind, against the shack trees' gentle drumming, against the barren parking lot's cratered face upon which we plant our feet. We begin to melt from woman to solid to liquid. From the main office window, it must look like we are dancing, though if our shadows told the story, it would say that our limbs are trying to twist the world like a wind-up toy. She points to the first sweat beads that congregate at the shore of my forearm like a handful of cabochons. They burst into prismatic rivulets. Miss Margaret watches my summer flesh alchemize. She is wide-grinned as I learn the secret, how in this season we become Black opal under each other's watchful eye. A week later, I smuggle myself through customs. In America, I try it again and again, the magic trick in which I make a rainbow of my skin every time it storms in this nation that I call home. Thank you. So I love haikus as a self-care practice, as a form of poetry, creating and building. And and I also love Gabby Douglas. And I wrote a poem for her because I feel like I know this, a few years ago, when she was winning a lot of awards, there were comments about her appearance and about her hair and all of these things that took away from her brilliance. And so I wanted to write her a love letter. So I wrote a haiku love letter for Gabby Douglas, who feels like my little sister in my head. Nappy wins the gold. Metal hangs from 4C curls. Your head holds glory. They said, focus on your edges. They must have meant both ends of the vault. The problem is you love yourself whole. This is the most dangerous act. Bend, but do not break. your backflip, a metaphor for this whole Black life. If you'd placed your hand on your chest, then we wouldn't have heard your music. Gabby, come knock on our doors, ask us what we've named our dolls and daughters. While mothers pray for your flight, babies watch your wings caress Jim's skyline. We hold you close, smile when we touch the forests that grow on our own heads. Thank you. This next poem is called New America. And it's basically thinking about what first generation American kids kind of go through in the limbo of identity, and thinking about what I would have wanted, and kind of, yeah, the conversation about finding home. A lot of my poems deal with home and just finding it and thinking about its possibility or impossibility. New America. Give me a kite that will twist its leash in flight to Oakland's sapphire expanse. Give me tradition, free from the thickness of horror. Trick or treat without my mother's fear of sewing pins and sedatives nestled in the chocolate's core. Give us some good news. An edited issue of the Oakland Tribune with every splayed corpse cut from its pages. Nimble fingers to make papel picado from newspapers, Christmas, or Ramadan, religion that will not leave me questioned, a dance and song that make me too lovable to hurt, shears to cut the tightrope umbilical cord, a flag whose fabric I can read, liberty or its synonym. Give me smelling salts to quell this leg of the Atlantic voyage. Give me sunscreen for my face and arms, a sturdy cradle rocking me back and forth at the shore of the Pacific, a lullaby, a hush, whisper with ocean breath that this is mine. Give me a torch to melt all the pennies saved to buy this Volvo parked in an immigrant's daydream. Give me an onyx cutlass supreme, blaring Donny Hathaway from its cushioned innards. Anthems to sing in a language that I want as my own, a Black that is steadfast and opulent, which is to say dangerous and infinite. Give me a voice that will not remind my parents of their homesickness, or maybe earplugs, paper, and a pen. Give me a quiet home. Give me a new America. Give our family hands that aren't scraped raw by passport page edges. Give me a new America, or a new me. Give me a landmass that reeks of apple pie and bleach, a silent pledge of allegiance. Give me a license at 16, wheels and gas and a hula girl rocking on my dashboard, a Hail Mary with no map, a minute to escape the sound of my misshapen name surfing off the cliff of every tongue, a minute to drive towards the blue, a careless twirl toward where I think I might belong. Thank you. I have two more. I'm an itty bitty. It's called You Can't Touch This, and it's just a haiku. You can't touch this. This Oakland circa 1990. So the haiku says, my 6th birthday gift was a pair of Hempsey Hammer pants made of real kente. That's all. That's a true story. I was the coolest 1st grader in Oakland. You can ask about me later. So the last poem I'm going to be reading for you all tonight, and thank you again. This has been wonderful. I've been studying for PhD exams for like the last 8,000 years. So it's nice to emerge from that cave and be around people and read poems. The last poem I'll be reading is called Biseidu. And yeah, I don't have anything else to say. It's based on a true story. And I started with my mom, so I'm going to end with my mom. Biseidu. While sipping coffee in my mother's Toyota, we hear the bird call of 2 teenage boys in the parking lot. One says, Biseidu, the other returns as they reach for each other. Their cupped handshake pops like the first fat firecrackers of summer. Their fingers shimmy as if they're solving a Rubik's Cube just beyond our sight. Moments later, their schwins head in opposite directions. My mother turns to me, revealing the milky John Waters mustache-thin foam on her upper lip. Waiting them Biseidu, na English, she asks, tickled by this tangle of new language. All right, be safe, dude. I pull apart each syllable like string cheese for her. Oh yeah, Demnawil Padi, she smiles, surprisingly broken by the tenderness expressed by what half my family might call thugs. Biseidu, 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 we chirp in the car, then nightly into our phones after I leave California. Biseidu, she says, as she softly muffles the rattling of my bones in newfound sobriety. Biseidu, I say years later, her response made raspy by an oxygen treatment at the ER. Biseidu, we whisper to each other across the country, like some word from deep in a somewhere too newborn pure for the outdoors, but we saw those two boys do it in broad daylight under a decadent ruinous sun. Biseidu, Biseidu, we say, Biseidu, and split one more for the road, for all the struggle, tumble, drown. Biseidu, we say, to get on the good foot. We get off of the phone, tight like the bulbous air of two palms that have just kissed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yalie. That was so beautiful. That was so beautiful. Why don't we take 2 minutes and can everybody hear?
All right, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. That was incredible. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I love Biseidu. That's
Okay, are we all back? Has everyone found their color on the hanky code? Is everyone running out to like order their hankies so that they can the one thing I will admit about the I know the hanky code is real, and I was a little sad that I missed the heyday, but I don't believe that you could, like, if you look at that hanky code, like, I don't believe you can distinguish between mustard, dark yellow, and bright yellow in a leather bar. Like, I just don't. Like, I just don't think that, like, I just don't believe you can distinguish between magenta, fuchsia, and red. And if you're looking for fuchsia and you get red and you go home, there are just some things that require a level of commitment and interest that if you don't bring.
How different, I'm trying to look at the list now, how different would it tend to be, like mustard versus gold or whatever? Like, is it?
I am not going to say. I'm going to let you explore on your own. Otherwise, we'll have to mark this when we put it on YouTube, and then the children won't be able to watch it. We have to go through all these things to get things up on YouTube about whether it's like made with children, for children, can children watch it or not. We always go with, like, yes, it's okay, but it's not for them.
Right.
Like, it's all right, but. And no children were involved in the making of anything KGB.
Who was the poet that it was at the New York Poetry Festival, and there were kids around, and she said, it was really funny. It was Jennifer Knox. I think she said, like, I forgive me for saying, I won't say I'm gonna be saying fuck around your child or something like that. And someone got really really upset, and but the delivery was great.
Yeah, my older brother used to bring my very, very small nephew to readings, and there was one reading where my nephew, who was like 2 or 3, like just ran up in the middle of the reading and like jumped into my arms for me to hold him. Like, and so I'm like reading all of these poems about like family trauma with this like tiny person, just be like, hey, welcome to the family.
Are they doing that this summer? Probably not, right? The poetry festival, maybe next year.
I don't know. Nick lives in the woods as like a caretaker up in the Catskills. He had some friend who he's been kind of caretaking for a long time, and not like the person is sick, but he has a lot of money, and he's like a financial genius, and then he bought some house in the Catskills, and Nick takes care of it. So I think Nick was going to try to create some sort of a poetry festival camp out thing up there, and which I'm sure would be a lot of fun.
Much fun as you bring to it, you know what I mean?
A lot of fun. I don't know about good clean fun, but a lot of fun. But
The people who discovered that you can't trademark the word brothel in New York. You cannot register as a nonprofit if your name is brothel.
yeah, that they had to
That's why they didn't do the poetry brothel, they did the Poetry Society of New York, right?
Yeah,
it's
that's how they
true.
became the Poetry Society of New York.
Yeah, their image laundering wing of their organization.
You'll have to let Nick know that if his ears are burning tonight, it's because we're all hoping we can get to Governor's Island for the New York Poetry Festival, which is a really wonderful event. All right, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's all every year.
Okay, Kazim, are you ready? All right. Okay. So I have like 3 or 4 different like introductions, most of which are about like our hijinks at NYU, but I'm gonna skip ahead from those. And if other people want, everything you've heard is true. If you have heard a story about me and Kazim at the Poetry Olympics in mesh shirts and candle dancing, or
I wasn't wearing a
black
shirt.
lipstick and Russian sailor
You were
suits,
wearing a
you were
shirt.
not. I was wearing the mesh shirt. You were shirtless.
Yeah.
And we won. And for the
did win. No.
record, the judges
No, we-
told us that we won, even though the judges told us we won after the judges told us we didn't win.
I know. Yeah.
It was a very
We didn't get
confusing
We did not
experience.
get the trophy though.
Well, and I can't relive this.
We gave
I'm
the
too
trophy
upset.
to Colombia.
It's a whole other story. If you stick around, we'll get into it later. All right, but I'm going to jump ahead to like the serious part of the introduction.
Jump ahead, yeah.
It is very hard to introduce Kazim Ali because if an introduction is designed to position the audience to know how best to listen to an author, Kazim's work spans so many genres and styles, obviously poetry, but also fiction, memoir, essay, translations, lyric, essay, up to and including choose your own adventure books. That which Kazim is going to be at the Zoom podium, I can't be sure. But I will say that this is what I think unites Kazim's work. Kazim is devoted to mystery, to a central aporia of something unknown at the center of human existence that we can talk around and limn the edges of without ever being fully able to enter. Kazim is a secular mystic, not someone who quite believes with Carolyn Forche that the silence of God is God, but someone who believes that if you trace the edges of silence, you will find what you need to heal the world. And that knowledge comes precisely from surrender, from not needing to know what the mystery conceals as much as needing to know what should be left mysterious. It is an ethical position that lays open room for an almost unified theory of man. Not the universal humanism of the colonizer who positions himself at the center of mankind, but a pan-humanist love of each of us in our particularities. As a materialist myself, I'm often rebuked by Kazim's insistence on the openness of experience and the refusal to pin down truth when that pinning down would be cruel, but rather to find the language in which connection transcends trauma to keep each of our lights visible. In Kazim's work, intuition is the light in the gloom, but the light is never there to dispel the darkness, but rather to caress and redeem it. to show the light and dark as lovers, not as opposites. Kazim has written far too many books for me to list, and I am going to stop speaking so that we can start listening to Kazim Ali.
Hi. I was gonna try to hold up the different books, but I can't hold them all. There's too many. Thank you so much, Jason. That was really, I feel seen, I feel heard, and I feel validated in what I decided that I was actually going to read tonight, which is in 2018, I published a little book called Silver Road, and it's a combination. There are essays in it. There's also kind of prose poems / lyric essays in it, and there's actual poems in it. But what I really want to read to you is one of the short essays that's in this book. And it's called Climb Up, Sure, but do you know where you are going? In early 2014, Israeli settlers entered the grounds of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and climbed up on top of the structure of the Dome of the Rock. Some years earlier, when I went to Israel, we had entered the plaza called by the Arabs Al-Aqsa, the far place, through the portals that led up stone staircases from the streets in the Muslim quarter, the eastern part of the city. There were caretakers at these gates to ensure that those entering were worshippers of Islamic faith and not tourists nor vandals. There had been trouble in both that place and other Muslim and Christian sites. Those passing through the gates are asked questions pertaining to religious knowledge, sometimes asked to recite certain verses from the Quran. You have to know them or you can't enter that way. There is another entrance. It's a security checkpoint in the Jewish quarter just next to the Western Wall. You go through a metal detector, your bags are searched like at the airport, and you pass through a little covered causeway that climbs up to the mount. It's not unlike the gates that bring one from an airport terminal onto a plane. There, on the wide plaza, amid park-like areas and open spaces, is the Far Mosque, built in the 15th century or thereabouts, on the site of an older mosque that had been destroyed, and also the glittering Dome of the Rock. Inside that gold-domed structure is, indeed, the rock. It is an odd piece of real estate. Some say that this is the place Adam and Eve entered the earth after expulsion from Eden. Some say this is the place where Abraham took his son, Ishmael or Isaac, depending on which story you listen to be sacrificed. And some say it is the place to which Prophet Muhammad was brought on his night journey from Mecca and from which he launched up into heaven. It is also, indeed, a very large rock. In any case, no one is allowed to climb up on top of the rock itself, although, once again, if you are Muslim or if you know enough Quranic verses to recite or accompany a friend who does, you can descend into a chamber in the heart of the rock called the Well of the Souls, the place the Ark of the Covenant is purported to have been kept. I did go down inside. What I saw there, softly illuminated, what that space was like, what I did there and how it felt, I will not say. We keep some secrets, and some secrets, they keep us. What is a nation? A place of common language, common origin, common cultural values and structure. What is it meant for? To protect you, to promote your economic or religious interests, to guarantee you access to natural resources. Empires were founded to bring from far places spices, vegetables, metals, and minerals. But really, I want to know, and this is not a rhetorical question, who owns a place and why? One of my favorite scriptural stories is about the king of Babel. I don't know if he was actually the king of Babel or not. That's probably a mistake. He was probably the king of some country who decided to build a tower to reach heaven, which is only an interesting place because a god lives there. Of course, as the story goes, said God cursed the builders by fracturing their language so they could no longer communicate with each other to build. The origin of poetry was the human urge to actually reach the geography of the divine. What are the implications of such thinking? Was poetry a curse or a gift? A response to the urge to build an edifice to reach what they thought was the actual physical place God lived, but which we now, of course, know the upper atmosphere is nothing but air, and that too, not much of it. Perhaps the story appeals to me because, to me, the most meaningful structures of worship are ones that are incomplete. For example, the setup for visitors and worshipers in the small plaza in front of the accessible fragment of the Western Wall seems completely impromptu. There are no permanent pews or fastened benches. It's literally full of plastic lawn chairs, some of which people bring themselves, pulled up next to it so people can sit at the wall and pray. Considering the diasporic nature of the Jewish people, the tenuous nature of any of their claims to quote home throughout their long history, there is something oddly touching about it. And of course, on the causeway leading up to the mount, very neatly stacked, for quick and easy access, one supposes, we saw scores and scores of head-to-foot riot shields. Chairs and shields, two stackable objects, told a stark story. And anyhow, as my friend who lives in Israel, a religious Jew, tells me, one of the names for God in Hebrew is the place. So Rachel argued, why do we end up taking any place on earth as sacred if God is the place? There is no road to heaven, in other words. The divine must live in the mortal world, then. In her poem, after a student, 15, declares he will renounce the world for God, Kathleen Graeber has the forsythia bush speak. I'm forever. I'm all the evidence you need. And of the Tower of Babel, Graeber dreams of being one of the builders, thinking how the gods must stop here at their own reflections. Living in the world, embracing that confusion means using the body to understand the spirit. In her poem, Love Isn't, Pat Parker confesses, I wish I could be the lover you want, come joyful, bear brightness like summer sun. Instead, I come cloudy, bring pregnant women with no money, bring angry comrades with no shelter. There is no separation in Pat Parker's reality between caring for the individual and being concerned with larger issues of social justice. I care for you, she says to her lover in the poem. I care for our world. If I stopped caring about one, it would only be a matter of time before I stopped loving the other. Parker's insistence on the inseparability of both concerns may feel anachronistic in our time. Consider Amiri Baraka's pointed criticism of Angles of Ascent, the recent Norton anthology, whose jacket claims of its contents, quote, these poets bear witness to the interior landscape of their own individual selves, or examine the private or personal worlds of invented personae, and therefore of human beings living in our modern and postmodern worlds. Baraka called that view, quote, embarrassing gobbledygook and imbecilic garbage, saying, you mean forget the actual world, have nothing to do with the real world and real people, invent it all? Pat Parker views such a practice, the examining of an interior landscape without also engaging in historical and material context, to be an actual form of insanity. In a foreword to her powerful book, Jonestown and Other Madnesses, Pat Parker writes, I must ask the question, if 900 white people had gone to a country with a Black minister and, quote, committed suicide, would we have accepted the answers we were given so easily? She creates a critical confluence between our ability to either engage or disengage from issues of social justice with the bodies that are victims of such injustice. The people who went to Jonestown with Jim Jones and drank the cyanide-laced Kool-Aid and died there, 918 in all, were most of them Black and most of them women. They seem thereby to be irrelevant, less worthy of concern. Discussing the origins of her poem, Power, Audre Lorde talks about anger at injustice as genesis for creative expression. And this is a quote from Audre Lorde talking about the writing of that poem. A kind of fury rose up in me. The sky turned red. I felt so sick. I felt as if I would drive this car into a wall or into the next person I saw. So I pulled over, I took out my journal just to air some of my fury, to get it out of my fingertips. In Nevada in 1980, there was a case of a woman who, rather than find creative expression, succumbed to such anger. Her name was Priscilla Ford, and she drove her car off the road into a crowd, injuring 23 people and killing 6 of them. Though expert witnesses testified that she was suffering from a variety of mental illnesses, the judge and jury believed her competent and able to tell right from wrong, and they sentenced her to death. Pat Parker writes of Priscilla Ford in a poem called One Thanksgiving Day. You cannot be insane. To be enraged is not insane. To be filled with hatred is not insane. It is your place in life. The state of Nevada has judged that it is not crazy for Black folks to kill white folks with their cars. Baraka, for his part, famously asked for, quote, poems that kill, by which I believe he meant poems that could confront boldly the real lived conditions of people's lives. That poem killed. And that death or dying was the passive act of giving up. In a famous poem by Lucille Clifton, who did not in any way shy away from embracing a Black aesthetic, went so far as to say, quote, white ways are the ways of death. And in Clifton's poem, The 38th Year, she refers to her own impending death, imagined impending death, of course. She lived for some 40 some more years. She refers to her own death as, quote, the final Europe. In the following, another short poem about Little Richard, she also uses the term faggot, ironically, while defending Little Richard's sexuality and non-conforming gender expressions, and puts the homophobia and sexism of the questioner on notice by using the term dying to refer to him. And this is the little poem. This is the entire poem, it's very short. Richard Penniman, when his mama and daddy died, put on an apron and long pants and raised up 12 brothers and sisters. And when Whitey asked one of his brothers one time, is Little Richard a man or what? He replied in perfect understanding, you bet your faggot ass he is. You bet your dying ass. For me, the beginning of nations, the beginning of our separation from one another, the beginning of the rules of gender and sexuality that would come to govern how wealth was transferred from one generation to another through structures of inheritance, are all antithetical to the life of the individual human spirit. And me, my sacred place is no rock, no remnant of a wall of a temple that hasn't existed for 1,000 years. Rather, it's my favorite kind of church, the wide open and interactive space of any museum where paintings hang, or any place poetry is recited or dance is performed. Last year when I wrote this, I climbed up into the tower, an exhibit space in the National Gallery of Art, to see the series of paintings by Barnett Newman called The Stations of the Cross. Newman himself used to talk about the place a painting is hung as a makam, I'm sorry, I maybe mispronounced that, a Hebrew word for place, with all the connotations of sacred that holds. Harry Cooper, the curator of the Newman Show, wrote, the Stations of the Cross might seem to raise the question, where am I? Is my proper place in front of each painting one by one, or walking by them, or turning around in the middle of the room to try to take in the series as a whole? For that matter, am I in an art gallery at all, as the title suggests, or as the title suggests, passing the stations on the road to Calvary? That's Harry Cooper's quote. There's no answer to his question. When I myself went on the Via Dolorosa when I was in Jerusalem, or as much of it as I could, the first station, of course, is inside a private building, and the last is inside a church. But somewhere north of the walled city in East Jerusalem, in a park very near to where all the taxis to Ramallah wait for their passengers, there's a smaller garden which others claim is the real site of Calvary. Who can say? It makes no difference to me. Mosques are empty inside, being just four walls that organize a space in which worshipers gather. There is no there. The architecture of buildings, after all, and the engines of financial, political, and military control are not unrelated. And of the men and women who went to Jonestown, Pat Parker says they didn't die at Jonestown. They went to Jonestown dead, convinced that America and Americans didn't care. On a day when I would have believed anything, writes Lucille Clifton in her own poem about Jonestown, I believed that this white man was possibly who he insisted he was. Newman gave his Stations of the Cross paintings a subtitle, Lema Sabachthani, Why Did You Forsake Me? The cry Jesus launched up at God in protest as he died. So what are the stakes then? If I had been wrong again, Clifton's speaker at Jonestown goes on to say, may even this cup in my hand turn against me. This is the passion, Barnett Newman wrote. Not the terrible walk up the Via Dolorosa, but the question that has no answer. Thank you for listening, everybody. I hope that wasn't too long.
Give us one poem before we do
You
that.
want one little poem?
Yeah.
One little poem? Okay. Okay, we were talking about Agha Shahid Ali before when Jason and I were on the call. So this is a poem called Agha Shahid Ali. Hold on, I'm going to find the book. Agha Shahid Ali recites Lorca to the orderlies at St. Vincent's Hospital. And there's a note. Grace Schulman recounted that Agha Shahid Ali once recited Lorca to an orderly during his stay at St. Vincent's Hospital. The rest of the poem is my own invention. And there are lines from Lorca that are interspersed in the poem, and you will probably recognize them. It's May, and the long cold spring has begun to loosen its stranglehold, not out of mercy, but because it finally accepts. We are hunched down in despair, and inside the hallways of the hospital, the patient stumbles, and Angel appears suddenly to hold him. Angel from Ecuador, the poet declaims in gratitude, since sound is his most intimate lover now. As they promenade through the wing, the poet begins reciting what little Lorca he knows by heart. Por el East River y el Bronx, los muchachos cantaban. And when he can't remember the words, his bird-like savior with the coal-black hair picks up the line. Tender Angel doesn't mind being held on to, clutched, not as orderly, but as spouse, because, like love, the archers are blind. At night, the poet cannot sleep, so he asks Angel to come to his room and read from his book. Another poet in New York, another dark brother who sang. And while he recites from memory, Angel turns pages and follows along in Spanish. Those silver threads wove from the poet's mouth to orderly's ear like the looping nostalgique of galaxies, because in the sky, there is nobody asleep. Turn blue then, the color of the sky and Mary's coat and the blood that races back to his heart as he recites all night long, as on the night of majesty the angels whispered into the messenger's ears God's words. Angel is transfixed, and no one is sure when Shahid switches from English to Spanish, because in his mouth all words are music, while outside the sky turns orange, turns the color of love. 18 years later, and there's a snowfall in May, and America drowns itself in machinery and lament. The hospital has been demolished, and like the poet long gone, lingering in the wind, I still believe, on the corner of 13th Street and 7th Avenue, the verses of Lorca quiver like a secret kiss, and somewhere in this city or the country or somewhere in the world, Angel breathes into another ears. Cover me with a veil at dawn. Thank you.
All right. So next week we'll be back with Diane Seuss and Kim Adenizio. And the link that you used to come in tonight will continue to work for the rest of the season. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. This was amazing. Thank you, Yalie. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Kazim. And we hang out afterwards.